Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mandy, and that's Dexter behind me this way. You can barely see him, he blends in with the futon. He's got a giant purple light in his face. I'm here today to talk about Final Fantasy XIII and why I love it so much. I recently finished uploading my entire playthrough of Final Fantasy XIII to YouTube after finishing the game live on Twitch. I streamed it on Twitch over a year ago now. But it took a while to get the whole thing up to YouTube. I will also be putting out my playthrough of 13.2 and Lightning Returns. They'll be in a bit of a different format though. I think I'm going to do compilations. So one video for 13.2 and one video for Lightning Returns, to where everything's condensed into a more, not bite-sized format, but at least like it's watchable in one sitting format. I've seen other creators do this with their video game, with their stream content, and I really like how it turned out when I did it for Witcher 3. So I think I'll do that going forward with some of the games that I stream. Not all of them, but some of them for sure. But today the point is Final Fantasy 13. And I like to do these videos where I talk about the game that I finished on stream, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and just my overall thoughts and how I felt playing the game, how I felt finishing the game. And this time I'm actually recording this a long time after finishing the game. Usually I would record like right after finishing it so that my thoughts are fresh, but now I've had time to reflect on it. So yeah, I don't know if I don't know which way I like more, but since it's been so long since I played and I didn't record this immediately, I figured let's record it now. Let's talk about Final Fantasy 13 some more, because I think it's a very underrated game that does not get the appreciation and love that it deserves. So I think where I'll start is the story, because to me, what drives me in playing a Final Fantasy game is almost always the story. Yes, a lot of Final Fantasy games have amazing combat. I put Final Fantasy 13 into that category. I enjoy the combat in 13 as well. But what really pulls me in most of these games is the story, and Final Fantasy 13 has a fantastic story, has wonderful characters. The cast of 13 is one of my favorite casts in all of Final Fantasy. I love those characters so much. I loved coming back to having a female protagonist in Lightning, having 3 really strong female characters in the party. It's 50% women in our party, and being able to play them the whole time, I loved that. Fang has ended up being one of my favorite characters in all of video games of all time. Like, it's insane how much I love her. I made a video about my top Final Fantasy girls when I had just started playing 13. So I hadn't really gotten to know Fang yet. I don't even know if I had met her yet. I think she had just briefly appeared, but I didn't know who she was. But man, I love her so much. And when in later games, I won't go into that because I don't want to spoil anything. But I was just craving to find out what happened to Fang and Vanille and their relationship. Oh, I love their relationship, but I was just dying to know what was going to happen to them at the end of 13, because that ending is beautiful and so sad, but just stunning. And like, the sacrifice that they make is so striking, and it's just a beautiful ending. I love the game. I love that story. I love those characters. The other characters as well. Saz, I feel like, is a very underrated character because he has an amazing story. Oh, seeing him be reunited with his son at the end was just almost too much for me. That reunion is beautiful. Lightning, going through the whole game looking for her sister, trying to get her sister back. It's like anything that has a sisterly connection like that, I will automatically be able to connect with, because siblings, I have 2 sisters, and I think siblings just have this special bond, and I've always felt that way, and I've always really connected with stories that tell tales of that sibling connection, and Final Fantasy 13 has that. People would come into the stream and say to me, oh, Lightning's just a female version of Cloud. But I think she's very unique. I think she's her own character. And I think her motivations, how she's driven, is entirely different from Cloud. Like, like she's doing everything for her sister. And it's an entirely different story. It has nothing to do with Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. 13 is its own thing entirely, and I love it. I also really like the world that they created in 13. I think they actually, people don't like it. People think they don't do a good job of world building. I think they do a fantastic job of world building. You don't know anything that's going on in the beginning of this game. But that's true for any story. And for some reason, Final Fantasy 13 just gets a lot of flack for it, where I think that's how you tell a story. You introduce the viewer, the player, the reader into the world, and they slowly start to absorb what's going on in the world. It doesn't need to be all at once. It doesn't need to be at the very beginning of the game or the story. You understand everything about the world. It wouldn't sink in that way. It wouldn't click. You need to be able to slowly absorb some of this stuff. Like any good story does that. Like when you think about something like Nier, which I've been recently playing on the channel as well, that story is a slow burn. Like it's you don't know everything at the beginning. You have to play through the game multiple times to even understand the world entirely. And anyway, I think 13 does a really good job with the story and the characters, and I love it. The music in 13 is also just gorgeous. Gorgeous. Immediately you start up the game, the music on the menu is beautiful. There are some areas when I was playing that I just found myself singing along to the music. I wouldn't want to leave an area because I just am enjoying the music too much, and that kept happening throughout the entire game. I loved that soundtrack. It's one of my favorites. It's really, really high up there, I think, in the Final Fantasy soundtrack rankings. And Final Fantasy has incredible music throughout the entire series, so that's really saying something if it's one of my favorites. Another comment that I got a lot on stream from people who don't like 13 is they criticize its linearity. And I think to me, that's just something I don't have an expectation of when I'm playing a game. I don't need it to be open world, and I really enjoyed 13's story. I play for the story, so having it push me along through the story kind of on tracks like that or on rails, that really didn't bother me. I enjoyed it. I also find that people accept that from games like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Those are really very similar in that you can only like really go forward in the story. It's pretty linear until you get to a certain point, and then you can go back. But in 7 Remake, you can't really go back at all. Like it is just very linear. It's 7 Remake is told the same way with like chapters, and like once you get through the chapter, you go to the next chapter, and then you're in this zone. You go to the next chapter, you're in this zone, and that's how 13 does it as well. And I really liked it. I had no problem with it. I really, really loved 13. People also don't love the combat so much because you're playing more with team dynamics rather than, you don't need to necessarily pick specific actions, but you do need to pick specific jobs that your team has. And I thought that was a really fresh take on combat because it mattered, what's my setup here? Who do I have going in? And what jobs do I have assigned to them? But not just like specific jobs, but specifically, if I have this person on Sentinel and I have this person on Mando, like then, I need to have the next person on Ravager, like just the strategy is very different in 13, and picking your different paradigms, I thought was so fun. I really, really enjoyed it. I hadn't played a game like that before, and I love how Final Fantasy does new things with their combat, with their stories in every single entry. Nothing is, just reusing the same thing. And 13 was something totally, totally different. And I really, really loved it. I didn't mind, having it do auto commands for me, because what mattered to me was picking the right jobs for the characters and in the right format, like in the right positions. And to me, that was what the strategy was. It wasn't at this exact moment I need to use this specific command, but it was the setup that was involved. And I thought that was really refreshing and really, really fun. Learning the different jobs, learning who was better at what jobs. and like when to use which ones. I thought that was fantastic. I loved it. I loved it so much. Playing Final Fantasy 13 on stream was one of the best streaming experiences I've ever had. I adore that game. Oh, the ending blows me away. Rewatching it every time still gets to me. I love the game so much. Check out the playthrough if you haven't. 13.2 and Lightning Returns are going to be going up soon, so look out for those. I really think that Final Fantasy 13 is worth revisiting if you're somebody who played it when it first came out and you didn't like it. I think go into it with an open mind. It's going to be different than maybe what you're used to in Final Fantasy, but every Final Fantasy is different, and I think it's definitely worth giving it another chance if you've never finished it, because the story, the gameplay, everything is so worth it to me, and I really loved it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up or commenting below and subscribing to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. I will see you all again soon for the next video. Thanks everyone. Bye.